Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our informational webinar on the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence's new round of requests for proposals for research funding. Um, this webinar is co-hosted by the Chronic Pain Network. My name is Dr. Abhimanyu Sood. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer for the CPCoE. I'd like to welcome everyone here today, and we're very excited for the launch in this informational webinar. We're going to start by handing over the mic and the screen to Dr. Norm Buckley, who's the scientific director for the Chronic Pain Network, and in fact, my predecessor as Chief Scientific Officer at the CPCoE. Norm, I will pass it over to you, and you can begin sharing your slides.
Great, thanks very much, Abby. Appreciate the opportunity here. Just to provide a little bit of background information and also to everybody on the line, and I can do this sort of shameless promotion of the COE now that I'm not officially part of it. But the Center of Excellence remains the largest single allocation of research funding for pain-facing research in Canada. So it's a great opportunity if you're a researcher with an interest in pain. And certainly the veteran population provides as many opportunities for research as any of the other populations. So uh, it's just a great opportunity, and thanks for inviting me. The thing I'd like to draw your attention today, when we created the Center of Excellence, one of the underlying principles we built into it was the principle of patient engagement, and in the specific case of veteran engagement, not just as victims of research, but as participants in the governance of the organization, and also guiding priority selection for research and participating in the development and conduct of research. And so that came from our learning from the Chronic Pain Network, which is funded by CNHR Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research. One of the resources that we've created and that we've gone live with in about the last 4 or 5 months or so, 3 months, has been something called Pain Connect. So you should see that on your screen now. It's an online resource that is available to connect researchers and patients. Let's see. Sorry, getting the right order here. So as I say, it's an online resource. You can sign in as a researcher or you can sign in as a patient partner. And I think we actually have a drop down to identify yourself as a veteran. We certainly have drop downs if you have specific conditions. As a patient partner, it allows you to indicate your interest in and willingness to participate in the conduct of research, but also to look for studies that might be relevant to your particular clinical condition. You can get weekly updates. You can get access to resources through the Chronic Pain Network. Researchers can post both opportunities to participate in the development of research, but also studies that are underway that may be seeking subject participants in it. And it's also a way for researchers to connect. The SPORE program's been in existence for between 10 and 12 years now, but it still is, as with all knowledge mobilization activities, it's still something that researchers are becoming more familiar with. So this is a way to connect with resources that will help to guide you in your conduct of research with patients actively engaged. I'll just leave this up for a moment or two. There is a magic QR code there, which you can take down, that will take you to the website. Or, it's as simple as Googling Pain Connect. One of two things will happen. You'll either find Pain Connect with the Chronic Pain Network, or you'll discover that this year's American Academy of Pain Medicine called its meeting Pain Connect, in which case you can skip over those links and look for the one that comes from the Chronic Pain Network. But anyway, it's an excellent resource. The team spent a fair bit of time putting it together and making it accessible and sensible. So please take advantage of it. And I will now stop sharing, but I have forwarded these slides to Chelsea. So if you have any questions or you have any trouble accessing it on the magic of the internet, get in touch with Chelsea and the team at the Center of Excellence. So thanks for the invitation, guys.
Thank you so much, as always, Norm. I really appreciate your presence and your guidance and your work in developing a larger, broader, more robust pain research network across the country, of which we identify CPCoE as one of the several important pillars. We have the next little while together to provide some information. We hope this is going to be very informative for you to understand as potential applicants what our research funding opportunities for 2025, 2026 are going to look like. And please note that this presentation will be, as Lauren has noted, will be archived on our website for future viewing and can be shared through a link once it's up there through your network in case you have colleagues who might be interested in getting more information about the RFPs. A little background about the CPCoE. So we are funded by Veterans Affairs Canada and are a nonprofit organization with McMaster University and Hamilton Health Sciences as key stakeholders. We were established really to enable research that will help to improve the well-being of Canadian Armed Forces veterans and their family members who are living with chronic pain. A lot of the impetus for starting the CPCoE came from some foundational research conducted by Veterans Affairs Canada, which at that time was called the Life After Service study, which identified that veterans are somewhere about twice as likely to have chronic pain compared to civilian Canadians. And this is obviously a much higher incidence and therefore required some specific research attention, given that across all kinds of areas of research, there has been very little, until the CPCoE came around, frankly, very little focused research on Canadian veterans living with chronic pain. Besides acting as a research funder, we aim to support researchers to mobilize their findings across clinical sites, policy networks, and a variety of key stakeholders across the country in order to achieve our mandate of ultimately using research to improve the well-being of Canadian Armed Forces veterans living with pain. A little bit background, we recognize that pain researchers, health services researchers, health policy researchers in Canada may not be so familiar with veteran demographics and sort of the nature of military service. A few key points. We estimate there being close to about 500,000 veterans in Canada. The latest data that we have from Veterans Affairs Canada from several years ago now, from 2021, but they're distributed really across the country with a concentration, obviously, because of the larger populations in Quebec and Ontario. And what we've identified through our work at the CPCoE, in part due to some research that we have funded, is that the common perception of veterans in Canada are older veterans, World War veterans, and sort of the prototypical veteran that we may see portrayed in Remembrance Day ceremonies. But in fact, When we look at, for example, the age breakdown, we see a much larger proportion of younger veterans in Canada compared to the very old veterans that we often think about, who may have served in some of the in the world wars, for example. This is part of our work is to shift our understanding of veterans, and particularly what we've identified is that in this younger population of veterans, continues to be a very high prevalence of chronic pain, including chronic pain that's comorbid with a variety of other illnesses, such as mental illnesses, traumatic brain injuries, sleep disturbances, etc. As Norm had mentioned, really um, from our outset, veterans living with chronic pain and their family members have been at the center of the CPCoE. We have used veteran engagement as a guiding principle to guide all of our research activities. One way that this has been operationalized has been through the Advisory Council for Veterans, which is a group of ranging between about 10 to 15 veterans living with chronic pain who have been engaged to guide our research processes and advise on our research processes, particularly through our priority setting process. Uh, what we identified was a need to have a robust and transparent approach to identifying what research we should be funding at the CPCoE. So several years ago, we engaged in a priority setting process, which had been informed by previous research, as well as other priority setting processes that started really at the outset of the CPCoE. In the most recent priority setting process, we had really four main steps. One was a gathering of issues of relevance, particularly from veterans and their family members, as well as clinicians. Less so from researchers, health administrators, policymakers, because we know that those latter stakeholders already have an outsized influence on the evidence generating process. So we wanted to make sure that we put veterans, their family members, and clinicians at the center of our priority setting process. So they submitted what we call, issues of relevance. What are important issues that veterans and their family members, as well as clinicians who are treating them, are facing? Then we conducted a rigorous evidence checking process because not all issues of relevance are issues because there's a lack of evidence. There may be an issue around implementation. We may know about an effective therapy, but not be using it in practice, where that can be directed more towards implementation kind of processes rather than evidence or research processes. Once we identified what kinds of issues could be potentially addressed by research, we conducted a priority setting meeting. We really our top 20 uh, uncertainties that could potentially be addressed by research were brought to the Advisory Council for Veterans, who went through a rigorous process to prioritize those uncertainties. And then ultimately, we use those uncertainties to develop our request for proposals, including this year's, the 2025-2026 request for proposals. And this will be our third cycle of RFPs that have been based on our last priority setting process. Um, Importantly, we are engaged now that it's been about 3 years since our last priority setting process, are engaged in a new priority setting process, which will inform our request for proposals for 26, 27. So watch out for that. If you want to get the full priority setting process report, please do visit our website, or feel free to email us at research@vcp-vdc.ca to get a PDF copy. For those of you who are considering, and I hope all of you who have joined us today are considering applying for the RFPs, we do recommend that you review the priority setting process report so you can get the appropriate context for how the priorities were developed, and how they've been used to inform the current request for proposals. Uh, this is our fifth year officially of the CPCoE. So feel free to put out the celebration emojis on your Zoom screen. And we're very, very proud that since 2020, we have funded more than 75 projects. I am not going to read out all these topics, but ranging from virtual chronic pain services to peer coaching to understanding the administrative data landscape for veterans in chronic pain, looking at interventions like yoga, exercise, ketamine, cannabis, examining complementary care, and using a variety of research methods from systematic reviews to pilot randomized control trials to qualitative studies to economic studies and policy analyses. It's a very wide breadth of research that has been funded by CPCoE. Um, we have funded projects in 8 provinces, 30 institutions, and in fact, internationally as well, spending over $8 million on research since 2020. We've also invested close to $500,000 in capacity building initiatives for graduate level students to increase the capacity, research capacity for veterans chronic pain research in Canada. We are looking and hoping to continue to expand the network of researchers who are connected to and funded by CPCoE. And we've been very proud over the last several years to see substantial growth in the number of institutions and their provincial affiliations that have been funded by CPCoE. Just to review from our 2024 competition, we had a success rate of about 35%, which is really what we are aiming for at CPCoE. So we have the right mix of competitiveness and high quality applications, as well as a reasonable acceptance rate for applications. And some of the funded projects looked at, for example, from the University of Laval, looking at a psychologically informed physiotherapy using non-invasive brain stimulation to improve physical functioning in Canadian veterans living with chronic pain. We had a project co-constructing a trauma-informed mindfulness-based program for veterans to improve quality of life. Um, We've looked at issues of chronic pain and substance use, specifically in women veterans, exploring the diverse experience of veterans living with chronic pain using qualitative approaches, and an example of an implementation science-informed research to action project. So a wide breadth of topics and approaches to this larger issue of well-being of veterans living with chronic pain. So on to our current competition. We have more than $1 million in research funding that is going to be distributed. As Norm had mentioned, the CPCoE represents really the largest and most sustained research funding contribution for chronic pain, not just for veterans, but for chronic pain in general in Canada. And we're very happy to have more than $1 million of research funding available for this competition. As we have in the past competitions, we're going to be focused on 3 streams or categories: health services and care innovations, exploring relationships between chronic pain and suicidality, and advancing research on chronic pain amongst women veterans in Canada. And I'll go through each of those in detail. And I'll also note that the RFPs are launched and available on our website. The application deadline is June 27th, so you have several months to prepare an application and submit an application. We obviously, as with other funding agencies, do not accept applications past the deadline. And you will find detailed RFPs for each of these categories on the website. But I will go into some detail on them today. So our first stream is focused on health systems and policy innovations. And I think, one of the important reasons and sort of synergies that we see in this stream is we are aiming to and hoping to build the capacity for health services and policy research in pain in general. Um, Sometimes what may not be recognized for those who have not done a lot of work with veterans is that veterans access the vast majority of their health care, including their pain care, through the provincial and territorial health systems. And so a lot of the issues around access, cost, availability, differences of health services and availability of treatments across jurisdictions that veterans face are comparable to and relatable to the same issues that civilians face. And so this is sort of one of our key tenets at CPCoE is often what's good for veterans living with pain is going to be good for civilians living with pain. And so we're aiming in this stream to have some objectives that are focused on, first of all, comparing health services for Canadian veterans and civilians across health systems. So, for example, we know that there have been pockets of innovation around pain care in different provinces, but there hasn't been a lot of opportunity and research so far comparing those health services changes or innovations to understand what can be done or what can be learned across different jurisdictions. Also, what has been identified is that there's a need, often a gulf between primary care and specialist or interprofessional models of care. The vast majority of pain care in this country is delivered in primary care settings. Um, but there's an important need and two-way relationship between primary and secondary and tertiary pain care services. And those have not been well researched, documented, identified, compared, analyzed, either for specifically for veterans or for civilians. And so we welcome proposals that are focused on helping to advance our understanding of the delivery of health services for pain with a focus on veterans, but understanding that there'll be important opportunities for translation to the civilian population. Another important priority, which has not yet been specifically addressed through previous research funding opportunities and research streams, has been looking at this relationship between chronic pain and suicidality specifically. Um, uh, there has been some research done elsewhere, including in Australia, and what that research has identified is that there's been really little to no research looking at the relationship between chronic pain and suicidality, specifically in Canadian veterans. We know that veterans live with a higher incidence, not just of chronic pain, but also of suicidality. And there may be opportunities for some foundational research in this area, looking at, for example, the relationships between chronic pain and other variables as a risk factor for suicidality in Canadian veterans. Likewise, understanding the impact of the relationship between chronic pain and suicidality on veteran families is an important objective of this stream, as well as looking at and evaluating clinical system or other policy interventions to better anticipate suicidality and support prevention interventions. And this relates, to a larger theme that we identified from a priority setting process of the important overlap between chronic pain and mental illness, as well as chronic pain and specifically suicidality. That it's very difficult and probably we would be remiss to look at chronic pain in veterans in a silo without considering the complex cluster of other conditions that chronic pain often presents with, including specifically in this case suicidality amongst veterans in Canada, as well as internationally. Our last stream is focused specifically on advancing chronic pain research in women veterans. And specifically, some of you may have seen the Invisible No More report that was published by the Standing Committee on Veterans from the Canadian Parliament, and they identified some important gaps, as has previous research, including research that was published by Simver and the True Patriot Love Foundation, which identified really a dearth of research looking at the experiences, the prevalence, the causes, the impacts of chronic pain, specifically among women veterans in Canada. We know that the some foundational research has identified likely a higher incidence and prevalence of chronic pain amongst women veterans in Canada. The reasons for that are not well known. And it's important for us to be able to identify what are some of the driving causes for the higher prevalence of chronic pain amongst women veterans compared to men veterans, but also comparing to women civilians. Often what we've seen in existing research that is examining the health of women veterans is that the comparison has often been to men veterans and less so to women civilians or women in other maybe comparable, somewhat comparable professions. And so analyzing the healthcare experiences and outcomes of women veterans and making specific relevant comparisons is an important objective of this stream. Likewise, exploring clinical, social, health services, or policy interventions to address the specific needs of women veterans living with chronic pain is the final key objective for this stream. So we welcome submissions along any of these three streams. Specifically, for those who are applying, you will need to identify which stream and which objectives your applications are responsive to. Okay. Really and you'll see with the detailed information on the website of the streams, what types of research is eligible, for example, clinical trials versus evidence syntheses versus qualitative studies versus policy analyses. Generally, we expect submissions will be for 1 or 2 year studies. Multi-year studies will be considered, but will need to be well justified. And principal applicants must hold an academic position at a Canadian or international academic institution at which they have to be eligible to hold research funds. As I mentioned, the applications are open now as of the end of March until June 27th. We have over $1 million in funding available. And there's enough, which means enough to fund about 2 to 3 proposals per opportunity. So overall, we anticipate funding around 8 or 9 applications this year. Applications are submitted by email, and there are very detailed application instructions on our website, including instruction guides, which I'll take you to now. So here's the website. Maybe we can pop that into the chat as well. And I'll take you through. So if you go to our main website, go to the research drop-down menu and click on the funding link. This will take you to the current funding opportunities. And you'll see a link to each of the specific streams with detailed information for the competition. Okay. And we are more than happy to receive any kind of clarification questions through the research process. You'll find that we're very responsive. You can reach us at the research email address. Obviously, we cannot provide input on the quality, merit, or specific focus of your research proposal. But we have very detailed information on the website, which will allow you to align your proposal to the objectives of the relevant research stream. All right, I'm going to stay on the line and we'll be open to taking questions towards the end of the webinar. Right now, I'm going to pass it over to our Director of Veteran Engagement, Chelsea White.
Thanks, Abhimanyu. So we wanted to take this time to talk a little bit about some of the requirements for those of you who are interested in applying. So on the funding webpage, you will see that there are 3 certificates that you will be required to submit at the time of application. So all principal applicants will be required to submit a certificate for SGBA Plus through the Government of Canada, CIHR, other recognized institutions, as well as 2 educational courses that have just been launched by CPCoE. We're really excited. These are brand new this year, and these are around patient, or in our case, veteran engagement. And so the first educational module is called Veteran Foundations for Researchers. And this is based on feedback that we had received from prior applicants in that we have a lot of people interested in working in the veteran space, but they may not have the background knowledge on military and veterans. And so this course will give you the foundational knowledge and tools in terms of military and veterans in the Canadian Armed Forces. And then the second educational module you'll be required to complete is Engagement Foundations for Veterans and Researchers. And this is a shared module for both veterans and researchers in understanding how to work together in the patient engagement space, particularly with the Canadian Armed Forces lens. So we're really excited to share these new modules with you. And again, the links to those are directly on the funding webpage. So you'll complete all of those and submit those certificates at the time of application. Next slide, please, Abhimanyu. And this shows you a screenshot of where you can access all of these. And then another frequently asked question we get from the research community is that we have a lot of people in the pain space who are interested in applying to CPCoE funding, but they don't have a means to be connected to a veteran partner. And you'll see on our funding webpage in the supplementary information we provide you as you're putting together your application, in the proposal instructions and in the rating scale, we do have a section on veteran engagement. And so if you are interested in applying, we do expect for you to be competitive in the competition to have a robust veteran engagement strategy. So CPCoE, in addition to what Norm has mentioned there with Pain Connect, CPCoE has launched a veteran engagement database. And so this will give you the opportunity to submit a form to CPCoE telling us about yourself as a researcher and your research project. And we will hope that we have a veteran in our database to be able to connect you to. So this is really revolutionary in the veteran space, in that we're trying to bridge these connections between researchers and veterans who may not otherwise have those means to be connected. And so on our funding page, if we go to the next slide, you will also see the link for you to complete that form as a researcher. It says if you're seeking a veteran research partner, please click here. And again, we do hope that this database is well utilized, and we welcome you to fill this out so that we can get you more connected in hopes of securing veteran partners in advance of applying, so that your veteran engagement strategy is competitive. And last but not least, I also wanted to share that before the close of the competition, this will be launched shortly, roughly in about the next month. There will be an entire toolkit for veteran engagement to support you as researchers. And so this will be your one-stop shop, a full suite of programs and information available for you, including guiding principles on working with veterans, roles, expectations, and guidelines. And these guidelines include things like compensation recommendations. So when you're building out your budget, you can include recommended honoraria for your veteran partners. It also includes information on our new database and the new educational models that I just spoke about. So stay tuned for that. We will also include that on the funding webpage. That is just in the process of being finalized. And I'll turn it back over to you, Abhimanyu.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. We can start taking questions. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. In the meantime, I will go over some of the frequently asked questions that we get. A question that we often get, and Chelsea has addressed this to some extent, is do I need to already be doing research on veterans to apply? Absolutely not. What you'll find is that working with the CPCoE, we provide a lot of support for researchers because we're aiming to build that capacity in support of veterans who are living with chronic pain. So more and more researchers can be familiar with and engaged with veterans to focus their research. And you'll find that veterans are often a fantastic research partner. And there are a lot of opportunities for learning more about chronic pain through engagement of veterans. Um, do I really need to know what a Canadian veteran is? Can I still apply for funding? This was because this was such an important and frequently asked question. This is really why our educational modules were developed. And obviously, while the modules, and I see the question in the chat, the modules are free of cost. We'll provide some foundational education around understanding what the nature of armed forces service looks like, what the transition from service to veteran or civilian life looks like, and that can be incorporated, of course, into your research process. And that's a process that does take time, and we do hope that the window that's open right now is sufficient time for you to get engaged with a veteran partner and learn about the nature of veterans' health and veterans' health research. And I'll also note that if you feel you need more time, we are going to be running our RFPs on an annual basis. And there will be, you can have the knowledge that on a yearly basis, there's going to be opportunities to submit an application focused on veterans' chronic pain. As Chelsea again identified, we have developed our veteran engagement database, researcher database, and veteran database, which offers an opportunity to connect researchers and veterans. And so we encourage you to check out that database. And if you're keen to get connected to a veteran, we have resources for you, and we also recommend that you just submit a profile or a request through our database process. And you'll see all that information captured in terms of what the role and the variety of roles that a veteran can play as an engaged partner in CPCoE funded research projects. So I'll answer some of the questions that I see in the chat. Ashley, thank you for your questions. Can nonprofit organizations apply? So nonprofit organizations can certainly apply as partners. However, the principal applicant does need to be at an academic institution and eligible to hold research funds at that institution. It may be a university, maybe a hospital-based research institute, but really what we look for is principal applicants who can, for example, hold tri-council funds. So CIHR, SHRC, or NSERC funds. If you can hold those at your institution, you are eligible to apply for and hold research funds from the CPCoE. If you need further clarification on that, Ashley, please feel free to reach out to us directly. Question from Dr. Shantana. Yes, there's no specification in terms of the proportion of population that needs to be veterans. We don't say it's got to be more than 50% of your population. As you will see in the application procedures, there needs to be a clear case as to how the research is directly relevant and responsive to the needs of veterans living with chronic pain, and identifying pathways for potential impact of the research for improving the well-being of veterans living with chronic pain. And we don't specify what those pathways are or what they look like, but you will have to make a good scientific case and for clarity, the research applications that we get, we first do an administrative review to make sure that the submitted applications are responsive to the objectives that have been identified. and meet all the application requirements. And then once they pass that administrative review, they go to our scientific advisory board. And Dr. Luc Hébert, I think, is on the call, who's the chair of our scientific advisory board. And this is an independent scientific advisory board that has clear criteria for adjudicating. And one of the things that they will be looking at is how responsive is the application to the objectives of the call, as well as responsive to the needs of veterans living with chronic pain and potential pathways of impact for improving the well-being. So, as you would with other um, um, research funding applications, you want to think about all those criteria in making the case. Certainly, we've funded a number of projects that have included as participants not only veterans but veterans as well as civilians. And in fact, you'll see that that may be encouraged in some of our opportunities this year, where we're looking at comparative studies. And of course, we want to think about, for example, in the third stream, comparing outcomes or um, uh, prevalence or other issues, other kinds of issues in women veterans compared to women civilians. So, of course, that kind of study would include participants who are non-veterans. So, Elizabeth, your question is how long will it take to make final decisions? So we received the applications at the end of June, administrative review, and as well as translation. So I should clarify that we accept applications in English and in French, and we have the appropriate expertise to be able to adjudicate French language applications. And then we have our scientific advisory board meeting at which the final ratings of the applications are made in September. And so you can expect to have a final decision from us by around October. And in around October, November is when we begin the contracting process with the highest rated applications.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No problem at all. And Jennifer, I think we've addressed your question as well, as in terms of being focused on veterans or comparative design with veterans and civilian participants. Again, you just want to make sure that there's a clear pathway for relevance and impact to veterans living with chronic pain. I don't see any other questions in the meeting chat at this time. Any additional clarifications or key points from the CPCoE research team? Chelsea, Doug, Luke?
No, not from my end, Abhimanyu. Thank you.
All good from my end as well, Abhimanyu.
Great. So I think that wraps up our informational webinar for today. We're very excited to have launched this new round of RFPs, and we look forward to questions and then subsequently applications from all of you in attendance today. And again, feel free to share this webinar. We will share the link for the webinar recording to you, to all those who've attended, and feel free to circulate in your networks, and encourage you to visit our website for more information. Thanks very much.
Thank you.